Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help. And King of Floors, your vinyl, laminate, and engineered flooring superstore.
Just ahead of Thomas Drance from The Athletic. It is Wednesday. All of our guests today are sponsored by the O's marketing team at Royal LePage. They will find your next home in Nanaimo, Nanoose Bay, Parksville, and Qualicum Beach. Find out more at wearerealestate.com. As we're joined now by Thomas Drance from The Athletic on a day when Jim Benning and the Canucks were extremely busy molding a different-looking roster for the coming NHL season. Thomas, thanks for doing this, sir. I know you're very, very busy. Again, thank you so much. How are you?
My absolute pleasure. No, I'm doing well. It's an interesting day of hockey news so far. Looks like, unfortunately for the Canucks, they ended up spending into one part of the market that's been extremely overheated, which is defensive-minded defensemen, especially those with some, bulk to their game. These prices are really high, and the Canucks have paid some really high prices, in my view anyway.
Okay.
But it's been an interesting effort to rebuild the blue line anyway.
So that leads us to Tucker Pullman, who a lot of people around here don't know a whole lot about. I think I have this right. 4 years, $10 million. What can you tell us about him, Thomas?
Tucker Pullman out of North Dakota, to take the Pierre Maguire route. He's a right-handed defenseman, 6'4". He's definitely a really good third pair guy, like a really good depth defenseman, but he's struggled on occasion when elevated a little bit higher up the lineup. And when you look at just the composition of this Canucks group, when you look at the calibration of Tyler Myers, it looks like, to me anyway, Tucker Pullman's the guy they're going to hope can sort of play with and stabilize Oliver Ekman-Larsson's game and most likely play matchups. Now, he played some matchup for the Winnipeg Jets last year, and the Winnipeg Jets had some stellar results. He was on a pair with Josh Morrissey, but by the underlying data, by the eye test, I thought that line, or that pair anyway, was probably Winnipeg's weakest. I think he's a player who is really best suited to playing a little bit more of a prescribed role on sort of a third pair, and it does look to me like the Canucks have committed to jumping into the deep end with him. The good news, I suppose, on the deal, because the cap hit's not terrible by any means. The cap hit is relatively efficient. The issue is the term. It's probably a year longer than you'd like, since Pullman will be 32 at the end of it. But the fact is just what they're going to likely end up asking him to do. I do think it might be a big ask considering his track record facing top of the lineup competition.
Okay, so then sticking in that category, Thomas, Travis Hamonic comes back to the Canucks. What was the market like for him from what you know?
Well, I'm reading the tea leaves a little bit here, and I'll have to get it confirmed once things settle down a bit. But my guess is that the Canucks didn't expect necessarily to be able to retain Travis Hamonic, and that this deal got done pretty late. We know it got done pretty late, right before the market opened. But when you consider that the club, widely expected to sign Luke Schenn, for example, turned out not to have gotten that deal done yet. Now, it still may happen, but that deal doesn't appear to be done yet at the time that we're talking. I do sort of wonder if there's a late deal for Hamonic proved to be a bit of a fly in the ointment there. I suppose we'll learn more as the day plays out. But yeah, I sort of didn't think that the Canucks would end up getting Hamonic done at 2 years, $3 million. They liked the way that Hamonic fit with Quinn Hughes. I'm not sure that pair was more than the sum of its parts. It certainly wasn't a Tanev Hughes quality success, I think, as a pair, but they like what Hamonic brings. I think there's no question that he fit in really well, was a good soldier through a really difficult season for the organization. I think they valued all of that. So I'm not shocked that the club wanted to get that done, but I do suspect that there was, an inkling anyway that they might not be able to, especially considering some of their posture and what we were hearing. We knew that the club was going to go to the 11th hour in talks with Hamonic and Sutter. But, to get them both done, I do wonder if that sort of changed some of their other plans.
Yaroslav Halak, Thomas, now it's Demko and Halak. Holtby just signed in Dallas this morning. Your thoughts on getting Halak in here as the backup?
Yeah, I mean, Halak's a reliable, a super reliable NHL player. He's been around a long time, and he's the type of technical goalie that probably makes a little bit more sense in terms of the way that Ian Clark likes his goaltenders to play. The deal itself is bonus laden. It's, $750K base salary, $750K signing bonus, and then there's another $1.5 million in performance bonuses, and those performance bonuses break down as follows, gentlemen. The way I understand it, it's $1.25 million should Halak play in at least 10 NHL games. That seems like a fait accompli. And then another $250K in the event that he can post a save percentage above .905. So what's interesting about doing a bonus-laden deal is that they're spending into essentially the cap space they created when they bought out Braden Holtby. The Holtby buyout saved the Canucks $3.8 million in space, and because Halak is over the age of 35, he'll only take up $1.5 million against the cap next year, even though his total compensation could be double that once bonuses are factored in. Now, the Canucks will probably be in LTI next season with Michael Furland's contract on the books. So that any bonuses that he hit will appear as a cap penalty the following season. There is some, sort of downhill risk there, I suppose, that they're taking on for the 2022-23 campaign. But, considering all of the chips that they pushed into the middle here, I do think the Halak deal and its structure was at least a creative bit of problem solving to eke out and maximize their space, especially because the goaltending market, gentlemen, as well, was one that, as we see Laurent Brossoit, local kid, signed for 2.3 plus in Vegas, was a little overheated itself.
Thomas, you talked to Michael Furland yesterday and got some quotes for the article. He basically essentially told you, look, it's over. My career's over. I can't play again. Tell us about your conversation with Michael Furland yesterday.
Well, the good news was I caught him on vacation in Mexico. So he seems to be enjoying life, enjoying time with his family, and that was great to hear. But, it's a heavy decision for someone like Furland who lived to compete and loves the game of hockey. And for him, hockey was his life. I do think he's still managing that. I think he'd love to get back onto the ice. I think he'd love to, let's be real, he'd love to continue his playing career. But he knows that with his history of concussions, with the fact that the Clifford concussion that he sustained right around Halloween of 2019 took him almost a year to recover from. And then he sustained another concussion in the bubble, and that took him another year. Like, he's only just starting to pull out of that. And as a result of conversations with his family, his commitment as a dad with two young kids, he just knows that the risks outweigh the possible rewards of returning. And that's a heavy conversation. And one thing I'd add, gentlemen, is, today anyway, every guy that signs, we talk about as their number, right? And for Canucks fans, Michael Furland is so often like the guy you move over one column on armchair GM mode to create the cap space that you then project the roster with, right? But there, the cap system, fantasy sports, that sort of dehumanizes players to some extent. But when you hear the human story behind Furland, when you hear how hard he worked to try and come back, the fact that he's at this point in his life, there's a heavy human toll behind some of these numbers. And in Furland's case, it was just good to hear him prioritizing family and doing well when we chatted yesterday.
Delaney's OK Tire and Langley Inbox. We're getting a lot of this, Thomas. What about, and maybe this is it for Jim Benning in terms of his signings from what we know, but what about that Russian player we heard was coming to help out Podkolzin?
Well, I think they would have done it if they could have found the right fit. But Podkolzin worked really hard on his English. By all accounts, he's improved pretty significantly in terms of his ability to speak the language. I don't think it's something that they viewed as a necessity. It's something that they viewed as, something they'd love to do if the right fit would have emerged. But I just don't think that it's something that they're going to go out and, spend 1.5 on Dmitry Kulikov when they don't need a left side defenseman just to sort of check that box. There's still European free agency. I mean, there's still ways that they can accomplish this if they determine that it's something they need. There's ways that they can accomplish it in season even. If Podkolzin comes over and after a month they decide it is something they need. So, I just don't think it's a particularly high leverage shopping item. I wouldn't be shocked if they circled back with some Russian speakers, once the meat of business is done, once the deals come down, the prices come down and there's value to be had. But I just don't think it was like a top-line item. Certainly not on the scale of, landing a massive right-handed defenseman, and the Canucks went out and signed 4 of them when you include Langley's, Kyle Burroughs, and Brady Keeper, a kid I know well, and I want you to ask me about, by the way.
Oh, Brady Keeper, today they just signed him.
Go for it.
Yeah, so Brady Keeper's from a small community in northern Manitoba called Cross Lake, and when we signed him when I was with the Panthers, so I got to know him a little bit. But when we signed him with the Panthers, he had like less than $10 in his bank account, and he was about to get a $92.5K signing bonus. Like, it was a life-changing signing. This was not your usual NHL signing, and he's got NHL wheels. He is an aggressive, tough right-handed defenseman, 6'2". I think the Canucks are going to like this guy. He signed a one-way contract, and he profiles to me as a guy who could be a training camp dark horse, like a guy who could even bust his way onto this roster, be the 7th defenseman at the NHL level, maybe do more in the event that he gets into it. His skills are a little bit raw, but he's just an incredible person. There's very few people I've ever encountered in this entire business that I root for the way that I root for Brady Keeper. I think the Canucks made a really wise decision signing him, at a low cap hit. It's a really sharp roll of the dice for the club.
Brady Keeper's from Manitoba. Nate Schmidt is heading to Manitoba to the Winnipeg Jets. Any more on what his problem was with Vancouver?
It's something that I don't think at any point that it was addressed in a very open, frank way with the team.
Guys, can I just jump in with a signing? It's not a big one, but you guys are talking about Canucks signings. They've just signed White Rock native Devontae Stevens, 5th round pick by Buffalo a few years ago. Stevens has been in the Tampa Bay organization. So we heard a few weeks ago the Canucks are going to sign a ton of local guys for Abbotsford. This is another one, and he's another defenseman. So the Canucks are signing a lot of local players. So that Abbotsford team, Thomas, 100% will be a lot of local kids on that team.
Well, and it makes sense. One thing to keep in mind, too, is the price of living in Abbotsford is a lot higher than it is in Utica.
Yes.
Right? You do kind of have to go shopping in a little bit of a different pond in recruiting top AHL talent. And make no mistake, gentlemen, the organization's intention is to ice a really competitive team in Abbotsford. And one thing that people forget about the AHL, one key difference between the NHL and the AHL, is that the AHL is not a capped league. You want to go look at which teams have success in the AHL, graph the salaries, and lay point percentage over it. And it's basically a straight line, right? The teams that's been the Toronto Marlies, like, they're the Yankees of the American Hockey League, right? It is the sort of league where spending into it matters. I think that there's been a ton of interest since the Abbotsford Canucks launched. There's been a ton of season sales. I expect that team to be good. I think it's an organizational priority to ice a competitive team. So, the names we've heard already, guys like Burroughs, Brad Hunt, Devontae Stevens, I think we're just getting started. I think Justin Bailey, too. I think we're just getting started. There's going to be a lot of talent on that roster. That's something that's really important to the organization as they launch their first-year local American League affiliate.
Do you want to finish your thought on Nate Schmidt, Thomas?
Sure, yeah. My understanding is the team and the player, I don't think, ever had a really frank discussion about exactly what was going on. But the fact is that his teammates were aware of it. And I think it came down to communication. Like, I just think it was an environmental thing, whether that's coaching or just how the team went about their business. I think he just, got it into his head that it wasn't going to work here. And I don't think there was ever a significant openness to have the sort of frank conversations that are required when things go badly, to patch it up. Ultimately, too, the way that Schmidt eventually waved to go to Winnipeg was that the Canucks were like, well, we're happy to keep you. And that was almost like the straw that, once that threat, I guess, became credible, all of a sudden a deal that, had been on the table for a while, but that he'd been unwilling to accept since Winnipeg was on his 10-team no trade, became something that he was willing to do. So an interesting one for sure. Schmidt will meet with the media in Winnipeg at some point this morning.
He has
scheduled availability. Oh, he did today.
He's talking right now, and he's saying he did not waive his no trade to go to Winnipeg. They haven't asked him about Vancouver yet, but he is talking to the media right now.
Okay, interesting. Well, it'll be fascinating to see what he says, but there's clearly more to the story here than meets the eye. And, you know, the one thing that I'd sort of cut him some slack on is that clearly the organization didn't make a positive impression on anybody last season, right? Like it was a really tough, really challenging year, and you can understand why a first-year player sort of living through it would have had a rougher experience than most people who've come through this organization over the years.
Thomas, this was last second. I know you're very busy. We can't thank you enough. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. See you, gentlemen. Bye.
You bet.